I'm 36 years old, a woman shaped by a relentless storm I never saw brewing. This story revolves around my late mother, who was 58 when she slipped away from me, and my former stepfather, a 67-year-old man who I'll call R. My mom and R had been married for 19 years, a union that took root when I was 17, back when we lived in a quiet Ontario suburb. Their home was a weathered two-story house, beige paint flaking off the siding, a front porch sagging under years of neglect, and a backyard choked with dandelions and overgrown grass. They co-owned it as joint tenants, meaning everything was split 50-50, a legal bond that tied them together as tightly as their vows once did. Growing up, I'd always felt a flicker of unease around R. His temper was a live grenade, unpredictable, explosive, and terrifying. He'd snap over the smallest things, a lukewarm cup of coffee, a shirt not ironed to his liking. My mom would shrink under his glare, her voice dropping to a whisper as she tried to soothe him. I'd watch from the staircase, a scrawny teenager in oversized hoodies and ripped jeans, my stomach twisting as I wondered if this was normal. It wasn't my place to step in, I told myself. I was just a kid, powerless against the weight of their marriage. At 19, I packed a duffel bag, hugged my mom goodbye, and moved into a cramped apartment with a friend from school, desperate for air and distance from their suffocating dynamic. Life marched on as it does. By 29, I was a single mom, raising 2 kids on my own. Liam, a wiry 6-year-old with a mop of brown hair and a gap-toothed grin that melted my heart, and Sophie, a 4-year-old with wild curls and a temper that matched her fierce little spirit. I worked retail, folding sweaters and stacking jeans at a mall store for $12 an hour, my paycheck evaporating into rent for a 1-bedroom walk-up with peeling wallpaper and a faucet that dripped like a metronome. Daycare costs forced me to choose between groceries and gas some weeks, and we survived on macaroni and canned soup, the kids oblivious to how tight things were. I'd always dreamed of being a nurse. Ever since I was little, I'd bandage my dolls with toilet paper and check their imaginary pulses, picturing myself in scrubs, helping people. But that dream felt like a locked door, barred by time, money, and exhaustion. Then, one rainy November afternoon, I sat at my mom's kitchen table, the kids napping upstairs in the attic. I poured out my frustrations over a mug of lukewarm coffee, how I wanted more for us, how I felt trapped. Her hazel eyes, shadowed with fatigue, softened as she listened. "Go back to school," she said, squeezing my hand so tight I felt her pulse. "Move in with us. The attic suite's yours. You and the kids can stay rent-free." R, hunched over a crossword at the counter, grunted his approval. "Just keep it clean up there and don't let those kids run wild." It wasn't warm, but it was consent. It felt like a lifeline, thin and frayed, but real. A week later, we hauled our meager belongings into their house. Me, Liam, Sophie, a crib with a wobbly leg, a suitcase of thrift store clothes, and a box of mismatched dishes, settling into the attic with its slanted ceilings, creaky floorboards, and a faint whiff of mildew that clung to everything. For the first year, it was a delicate balance. I enrolled in a nursing program at the community college, a 20-minute bus ride through streets lined with bare trees and gray slush. Mornings were chaos, packing peanut butter sandwiches into Liam's Batman lunchbox, wrestling Sophie into her coat, dropping them at school, then sprinting to catch my bus with a backpack stuffed with textbooks. I'd stumble home after dark, bone-tired, and collapse onto the attic's lumpy mattress, highlighters staining my fingers as I studied anatomy and pharmacology late into the night. My mom was my saving grace. She'd braid Sophie's tangled curls into crooked plaits while I memorized the stages of wound healing, her hands steady despite the tremor I'd started to notice. She'd sit with Liam at the kitchen table, guiding his crayons over coloring books, their laughter drifting upstairs like a bomb. R kept his distance mostly, tinkering in the garage with his rusted tools, the clank of metal on metal a constant hum, or sprawled on the living room couch, the TV blaring hockey games and beer commercials. I'd hear him bark at her sometimes. "Why's the sink full again?" Or, "This soup tastes like dishwater." And she'd deflect with a nervous laugh, her hands fluttering as she rushed to fix whatever he'd found fault with. I stayed out of it. My focus narrowed to grades, diaper changes, and keeping the kids quiet so R wouldn't complain. Their marriage was a puzzle I didn't have the pieces to solve. Then, 2 years into my program, the world cracked open. My mom started feeling off, stomach cramps that bent her double, a bone-deep exhaustion that left her slumped on the couch for hours. She'd wave it away when I asked, blaming stress or a bad night's sleep. R's been grumpier lately, she'd say, rubbing her temples with a faint grimace. But I saw the pain flicker across her face when she thought I wasn't looking, how she'd clutch her side climbing the stairs, how her appetite dwindled to sips of tea and half-eaten toast. Dread gnawed at me, a cold fist in my chest. I booked her a doctor's appointment myself, borrowing Jake's beat-up hatchback to drive her there one crisp October morning. She sat in the passenger seat, quiet, staring out at the blur of trees as leaves skittered across the road. The diagnosis hit like a thunderclap: pancreatic cancer. The doctor, a wiry man with thinning hair and a clipped tone, showed us scans dotted with dark masses, explaining she'd need surgery to remove a cluster of tumors, a desperate bid to slow the beast inside her. It was scheduled for the following week, but 5 days before, I was upstairs quizzing myself on antibiotics when my phone rang. It was her, voice shaking like a leaf in a storm. "Something's wrong. It hurts so bad, I can't move." I bolted downstairs, heart hammering, and found her crumpled on the bathroom tile, clutching her stomach, her face gray and slick with sweat. "Mom!" I yelled, dropping to my knees beside her. Liam and Sophie peeked from the hallway, eyes huge, as I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911. "Stay with me, Mom, please," I begged, my voice cracking as I held her hand, her fingers cold against mine. Paramedics stormed in minutes later, boots thudding, stretcher rattling, and whisked her away. I followed in Jake's car, the kids strapped in the back, silent and scared. At the hospital, the news worsened. Tests showed a tumor had ruptured, spilling cancer through her system like ink in water. A biopsy confirmed a rare, aggressive strain in her lymphatic system, fast-moving, merciless. The oncologist, a soft-spoken woman with tired eyes and wire-rimmed glasses, sat us down in a sterile room that smelled of antiseptic. "Without treatment, 18 months, she said, her voice steady but heavy. "With chemo and radiation, twice a week starting soon, maybe 3 years if she's strong enough to fight." My mom nodded, her hands trembling in her lap while I scribbled notes on a napkin, trying to anchor myself. R had tagged along, slouched in a corner chair, arms crossed, scowling like he'd been dragged there against his will. When the doctor finished, he erupted. "She's not doing that garbage!" he roared, slamming his fist on the table so hard the clipboard jumped. "It's a waste of time. She'll tough it out without all that poison." The doctor blinked, unfazed, but I saw my mom flinch, her shoulders hunching as if she could disappear into herself. R stormed out, his boots pounding the linoleum, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. My mom leaned toward the doctor, her voice a whisper. "I'm terrified. If I don't do this, I'll die, but he won't let me." The doctor scribbled it down. Her medical file now holds that note, backed by a nurse's edition. "Patient expresses fear of spouse-obstructing treatment." I sat frozen, the weight of her words sinking in, not yet understanding how they'd become my lifeline. Back home, R's control tightened like a vice. His verbal barbs turned vicious. "You're weak, always whining. Stop playing sick." And he'd tower over her, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow over her shrinking 5'2" figure. Then the physical signs crept in, bruises blooming on her wrists, her forearms, faint purple smudges she'd dismiss as clumsiness when I asked. I wasn't fooled. I'd seen his hands grip her arm too hard when she moved too slow. He drained their joint account. $12,000 vanished in a week, the bank statement showing cash withdrawals and transfers I couldn't trace, leaving her without a cent for groceries or gas. One morning, her sedan wouldn't start. I called a mechanic friend who poked under the hood and frowned. Sugar syrup in the gas tank. Someone sabotaged it. My stomach dropped. She was supposed to go to chemo twice a week, but R would hide her keys, unplug the landline so she couldn't call for help, or plant himself in the doorway, arms crossed, a human wall daring her to push past. If Jake or I didn't drive her, him in his grease-stained overalls, me juggling the kids, she'd miss it. She made maybe 1 appointment out of 4, her skin growing sallow, her frame thinning with each skipped dose. 6 months into this nightmare, I couldn't bear it. I moved her upstairs with us, turning the attic into her haven. Her twin bed sat wedged between Liam's Lego towers and Sophie's pile of stuffed animals, a faded quilt from her childhood draped over her knees, its stitches fraying like her hope. I'd lie awake at night, hearing her cough through the thin walls, the sound a knife in my chest. Fury simmered, then boiled over. I confronted R one evening in the kitchen, the kids asleep upstairs, the clock ticking past 10. He was nursing a beer, the TV muttering a late-night infomercial. "You're killing her," I said, my voice trembling but firm, hands balled into fists at my sides. "If you don't stop, I'll make sure you answer for it." He laughed, a low, guttural sound that chilled me to the bone. "You're just a girl," he sneered, leaning forward, his breath sour with alcohol. "What are you gonna do, cry me into jail?" Then he turned on me. The taunts flowed. "Your degree's a joke. Those brats ruin everything," and escalated. One night, he shoved me when I blocked his path to the stairs, his meaty hand slamming into my shoulder. I stumbled into the counter, pain flaring, but caught myself, staring him down as he smirked and lumbered off. I hired my mom a lawyer, Carla, a no-nonsense woman with a steel-trap mind and a fire for family law. I also ditched nursing for paralegal studies, trading dreams of scrubs for the cold logic of legal briefs. Nights blurred into a haze of case law, diaper changes, and hospital runs. I needed to outsmart R to build a cage of evidence he couldn't escape. We started gathering proof, planting audio recorders around the house. I didn't hide them, told R they were for safety, meeting his glare as I taped one to the living room bookshelf, another to the kitchen counter. He shrugged, too cocky to care, his arrogance a gift I'd unwrap later. Over 10 months, we captured him raging at my mom. "You're not leaving this house, you hear me?" And threatening me. "I'll bury you all before I lose what's mine." His voice crackled through the recordings, raw and unfiltered, each word a nail in his coffin. Meanwhile, I'd gotten pre-approved to buy his 50% of the house. $275,000, a clean deal brokered through the bank. One signature, and he'd walk away with cash. "Not a chance," he snarled on tape, his voice dripping venom. "I'll burn this place to the ground with you in it first." Carla drafted summons for court, a stack of papers detailing his abuse and our claim to the house. A process server handed them to R on the porch one rainy afternoon. He tossed them into the mud, sneering, "I'm smarter than your fancy lawyer." He didn't show up to the hearing. His absence was his undoing. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair pulled tight and a voice like gravel, sat behind her bench, peering over glasses at Carla's evidence. The recordings, bank statements, mechanics report, medical notes. She granted my mom sole ownership of the house, froze R's assets under her supervision to stop him from draining more, and issued a restraining order. No contact with us, no stepping foot on the property, no leaving Canada pending further proceedings. That night, 2 officers escorted him out, his boots dragging as he cursed into the dusk. "You'll regret this, you little..." The door slammed shut behind him, cutting off his venom. We changed the locks by morning, the deadbolts click a quiet hymn of victory. With R gone, we rebuilt what we could. Mom got on ODSP, Ontario's disability support, and finally started treatment consistently. Cancer Society vans rolled up to the curb when Jake and I couldn't drive, their drivers chatting with her about the weather or her favorite tea as they helped her into the back seat. Carla worked her magic again, severing the joint tenancy and making them tenants in common. In Canada, joint tenancy means if one spouse dies, the house automatically goes to the other. Tenants in common split ownership, and the deceased's share follows their will. Mom, still sharp despite the chemo fog clouding her mind, rewrote hers with Carla's guidance. The house, her meager savings, even her grandmother's pearl earrings, left to me. We recorded her wishes on video in the attic one quiet afternoon, her frail hands clutching a pen as she spoke, her voice thin but resolute. "I want my daughter to have it all. She's fought for me." Carla sat beside her, nodding, a notary scribbling signatures on a clipboard. The next 18 months were a grueling marathon of chemo drips, court dates, and caregiving. R kept dodging, refusing divorce papers Carla sent, rejecting buyout offers I'd sweetened to $280,000 just to end it. In one settlement hearing, he showed up unwashed and belligerent, facing Carla and the judge across a polished table. "I'll wait her out," he said, smirking, his yellowed teeth bared. "When she's dead, it's all mine." The judge's eyes narrowed, her pen pausing over her notes. "That's not how this works, sir," she said, her tone ice cold. "The rulings stand." He laughed, a harsh, barking sound, and stopped attending after that, disappearing from the process like smoke. I became Mom's everything, cooking bland broth she could stomach, adjusting pillows under her bony frame, holding her hand through waves of nausea that left her gasping. Liam and Sophie adapted in their own small ways, tiptoeing around her bed, whispering bedtime stories about brave knights and talking animals to coax a smile from her pale lips. I'd sit with her at night, the attic dark except for the glow of a lamp, listening to her shallow breaths, memorizing the lines of her face as they deepened with each passing week. Near the end, it happened fast. It was a Tuesday, rain drumming the attic windows in a steady rhythm. She'd been weaker that week, barely eating, her eyes glassy with fatigue. I was folding laundry on the couch when she gasped, a sharp, ragged sound, and collapsed beside me. Blood soaked her shirt, spreading dark and fast from her chest. "Mom!" I screamed, dropping the towel, my hands flying to her. I yelled for Jake to call 911, fumbling for anything, towels, a blanket, to press against the flood. "Stay with me, Mom. Please don't go," I begged, my voice breaking as I held her, her body limp against mine. Her eyes fluttered, locking on mine for a fleeting second, then drifted shut. The paramedics arrived too late, their sirens wailing as they burst in, but she was gone. Her last breath a shudder against my cheek, her blood staining my hands, my shirt, the couch. A tumor had ruptured, triggering a massive internal hemorrhage, the doctor later explained, his voice flat with practiced sympathy. I sat there, numb, as they wheeled her away, Liam and Sophie clinging to Jake in the corner, their sobs echoing in my skull. The trauma burrowed deep. PTSD, diagnosed months later by a therapist who nodded as I recounted the scene, the memory looping in my nightmares, waking me in cold sweats. After her death, R vanished. New phone number, no forwarding address, nothing updated with the courts. Carla took Mom's will through probate, a process that felt both endless and mechanical. With the prior rulings, her video testament, and the shift to tenants in common, everything transferred to me, the house, her assets, all stamped legal by the judge's gavel. I signed papers in a fluorescent-lit courtroom, my hands steady despite the grief clawing at my chest, the weight of her absence pressing down. I kept Mom's medical file, especially that damning note. Patient reports fear of spouse obstructing treatment. Carla and the judge agreed R's sabotage shortened her life, blocked treatments, drained funds, tampered car, but pinning criminal liability was a steep hill. We're still fighting that battle, Carla estimating a 55-45 shot based on the recordings, his own taped confessions, and witness statements from neighbors who'd seen his tantrums. I won't let it drop. It's the last piece of her I can defend. The house is mine now, fully registered in my name, the deed a crisp sheet of paper I keep in a locked drawer. Mom's life insurance, $150,000, poured in a few weeks later, and I used it to clear their joint debts. The mortgage, a credit line R had maxed out on tools and beer, a car loan for the sedan he'd sabotaged. He'd banked on inheriting a windfall. He got nothing but air. In court, I agreed to honor the original $275,000 buyout for his 50% equity, but with a catch. Any debt he owes me comes off the top. His tabs at $60,000 and climbing, repairs, the roof leaks, the furnace groans, joint bills I've paid solo, my therapy bills for PTSD that rack up with every session. Carla's pushing to add half my legal fees, thousands spent on filings and hearings, and losses tied to the trauma, like missed work when the flashbacks hit too hard. But we need R's location first, and he's a ghost. In Canada, claims lapse after 2 years if you don't pursue them. R filed to reclaim the house months after Mom's death, a sloppy counterclaim scribbled with spite, but he never showed up to defend it. I sat in court that day, palms sweaty, as Carla laid out our case again, recordings, rulings, his absence. The judge tossed his claim as abandoned, her gavel a sharp crack that echoed in the empty room. A friend of Jake's, a tech-savvy guy who owed us a favor, did some online digging and found R's trail. Posts on a shady expat forum hinting he's in Costa Rica, sipping cheap rum on a beach, breaching the travel ban from his restraining order. Carla's chasing that violation with the authorities. It's a separate mess, and I'm staying out of it, letting her wield the law like a blade. If R stays gone and dies down there, Carla says we'll petition his estate for his 50% equity, offsetting it against the mounting debt he owes me, collateral for the chaos he left. If he slinks back, he'll face penalties for skipping the country, maybe jail time if the Crown pushes it. Either way, he's got no legal leg to stand on. The abandoned ruling bars him from filing again. He's lost the house, full stop. I'm still in court, chasing accountability for what he did to her. The system's on my side. Judges, lawyers, a mountain of evidence from those recorders and medical notes. R delayed her care, hastened her death, and I took everything he gambled on legally because he underestimated us, me, my mom, the quiet strength we built in that attic against his storm.